All right, let's jump right into today's explainer. Today, we are exploring one of the absolute most fascinating and foundational stories of Central Asian civilizations. We're going to unpack an epic tale that blends history, geography, and mythology into this incredibly powerful narrative of survival and rebirth. By the time we're done here, you'll understand exactly how the ancient roots of the Turkic peoples were forged in legend and literally recorded in stone. Now, you might be wondering, how exactly does a boy left for dead in a swamp team up with a mythical wolf to kickstart one of history's absolute greatest nomadic empires? I know, it sounds literally like something straight out of a fantasy novel, right? But this isn't just some fairy tale. It is the foundational origin story of the Göktürk Khaganate, an empire that would go on to fundamentally shape the history of Eurasia. Let's find out exactly how this incredible story actually unfolds. Section 1. The Massacre and the Boy, A Tale of Survival. So picture this. We're near the foothills of the Altai Mountains, right under that endless blue sky of the steppe. Out of nowhere, a Turkic tribe is completely ambushed in the dead of night by their enemies. It's an absolute massacre. When the dust settles, there is literally only one survivor, a 10-year-old boy. The enemy soldiers actually take a bit of twisted pity on him because of his age, but they're terrified he'll grow up and seek revenge. So what do? They sever his arms and legs and just toss him into a deep, reedy swamp to die. Honestly, it's a brutal scene. But just as he's writhing in pain, waiting for the end, something miraculous happens. He's visited by a celestial, sky-blue she-wolf. She was sent directly by the sky god. She brings him meat, licks his wounds, and miraculously, completely heals him. From here, the myth takes a massive pivot from just survival to the literal creation of a dynasty. As the boy grows into a man, he and this celestial she-wolf unite, in a deeply symbolic, mythical sense, to forge a completely new lineage. But, the danger wasn't actually over. His old enemies catch wind that he's somehow still alive, and they head straight back to that swamp to finish the job. In a totally desperate escape, aided once again by the sky god, the she-wolf flees with him. They fly all the way toward the high mountains northwest of the Turfan region, desperately hunting for a hidden sanctuary where absolutely no enemy could ever reach them. Section 2. Rebirth of the Göktürks, from the hidden plain to an empire. Okay, so tucked away in this secret, lush plain surrounded by impossible mountains, the she-wolf gives birth to 10 half-human, half-wolf boys. These sons grow up, they marry women from outside the sanctuary, and the tribe begins to multiply like crazy. Naturally, the smartest son rises up to become their leader. And to really honor these extraordinary origins, he raises a wolf head banner right outside his tent. This wasn't just decoration, by the way. It was a huge, bold symbol of military independence. Eventually, this tribe gets so massive that the hidden mountains literally can't contain them anymore. So in this epic, legendary display of strength, they melt the surrounding Iron Mountains. Yes, they melt Iron Mountains and step right out onto the historical stage, officially reborn as the Göktürk state. Now, all of this brings us to a massive question, and it's one that historians absolutely love to argue about. Is this epic just a really good myth, or is there actual historical proof? Let's pivot for a second from the dramatic storytelling and look at the cold, hard evidence. Section 3. The historical evidence, chronicles, and stone. Here is something kind of wild. We don't actually learn this specific epic directly from the Göktürk's own writings at first. Nope. Instead, it was meticulously documented by their neighbors. Official Chinese chronicles, specifically the Book of Shou and the Book of Sui, actually recorded this exact origin story, which really just goes to show you how deeply this specific narrative was tied to the political identity of the Göktürks on a huge international level. But wait, it gets better. We actually have physical archaeological proof, too. I'm talking about the 6th century Bugut inscription. If you look right at the top of this ancient stone monument, there is a relief carving that clearly depicts a child nursing from a wolf. This is absolutely massive. It proves that this whole wolf motif wasn't just some later historical invention. It was literally carved into stone during the height of the Göktürk era. It was real to them. Section 4. Unlocking the concepts, the language of the empire. All right, let's break down some key terms, starting with Ashna. This was the sacred founding ruling clan of the Göktürk Khaganate. So whenever you're reading ancient texts and they mention a lineage descending directly from the celestial wolf, they are talking about the Ashna clan. Basically, being an Ashna was the ultimate, undisputed mark of political legitimacy. Next up is Tuj. Sometimes you'll see it spelled Tu Chue.
This is simply the name given to the Göktürks by their Chinese neighbors in all those ancient texts we just talked about. Knowing this exonym is honestly like having a cheat code for historians. It helps us easily connect the dots across entirely different cultural records.
And then we have this super vital concept, Kut. Kut is essentially the divine right to rule, and it's bestowed directly by the sky god Tengri. By claiming they descended from a celestial wolf sent by Tengri, the Shina rulers weren't just flexing and saying they were strong, they were claiming an unshakable, literal divine legitimacy in the eyes of their people. They possessed Kut. Case closed. Now, there is a key distinction you definitely need to keep in mind here, because there are actually two major wolf epics, and they get mixed up all the time. First is the Göktürk epic, which is the one we're exploring today. That's a story of origin and creation, right? The wolf acts as a celestial mother and protector. But on the flip side, you have the Ergenekon epic. That's a totally different, later story where the wolf acts purely as a guide, leading the people out of the mountains, so same animal, but very, very different mythological roles. Section 5. Geography of the legend, mapping the myth. What's really cool is that this myth is firmly grounded in actual real-world geography. First off, we have Karahoka, located in the Turfan region of East Turkestan. This is the rugged, highly mountainous area where Chinese sources say the celestial wolf sought refuge and where that secret cave was supposedly located. And then there's Otoken. Once the tribe finally emerged from the mountains, Otoken became the sacred center. It was the ultimate capital and the true spiritual heartland of the Göktürk state.
Section 6. The cultural legacy, from antiquity to the modern republic.
So, how exactly does a myth from the 6th century survive all the way into the 20th century? Well, through some pretty incredible historical continuity. The gray wolf, or Göktürk, absolutely did not just fade away into ancient history. It stayed relevant. It remained this incredibly potent symbol of cultural heritage and independence. In fact, it was so deeply woven into the cultural DNA that during the early years of the modern Turkish Republic, the Göktürk motif was featured right there on the very first 5 Turkish lira banknotes. It was literally a direct bridge from ancient antiquity straight into modern institutions. I think the ultimate takeaway from this entire epic is perfectly captured right here. The severed limbs symbolize historical military devastation, but the escape to the mountains represents an unbroken spirit of resistance that refuses to perish. I mean, wow, this isn't just a story about a wolf and a boy. It is a profoundly deep cultural metaphor for survival, and it leaves us with such a fascinating question. Just how much of our modern identity is still secretly anchored to the ancient myths of our ancestors? Definitely something to think about the next time you look at the symbols all around you. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep exploring.